With me today, the author of this wonderful book, which we have one copy of, Omar Ali Khan, an entrepreneur, movie critic, a filmmaker, collector of film memorabilia. He's here to launch his wonderful and wacky book on what I would like to say is the underbelly of the Pakistani film industry. So we'll talk a bit about that project and discuss some of the stories that are going to come up in that. We also have Farjad Nabi, again Pakistani writer, film producer, director, cinematographer and documentary maker. We all know his film from 2013, Zinda Bhag, which became the first Pakistani film in over 50 years to be submitted for Oscar consideration in the Foreign Language Film Award category at the 86th Academy Awards. I actually recall his first real breakthrough, which was the Nusrat Has Left the Building. I saw it in Islamabad, and it went on to win the second Best Film Award at the Film South Asia, Kathmandu. But my favorite film of yours, of course, is the wonderful No One Believes the Professor, which actually did win the award. He has a number of projects in the pipeline, maybe we'll come to that. But I'm going to, just before I hand over to Farjad, just talk very briefly about the impact that Umar has had on what his contribution to Pakistani cinema has been. And I'll mention a few points here. He is the entrepreneur behind the Hotspot, and the Hotspot reintroduced, I think, to many, many young people particularly, this idea of what Lollywood was, through the posters, through the music. And I think, once that came up, we found so much of that actually transferring into newspapers, into postcards being made, into mugs being made. So really that reinvigorated what Lollywood was for a new generation of people. I speak for myself that, I wrote an article on Zinda Lash. A colleague of mine at LUMS wrote an article on Ziba Khana. We had a screening of Ziba Khana, which Umar made at LUMS. We had Rehan Saab and Nasir Adib Saab come to LUMS and speak. I went on to edit a book on cinema and society, and really all of that has been down to the inspiration that Umar has provided me and a lot of other people. So really the contribution goes beyond simply this book, but I'm going to ask Farjad now to speak a little bit about the book, and then Umar can.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. Not many people have seen Nusrat when it was screened in '97, so I'm really humbled by that. It's a great occasion here. We have very few books on Pakistani cinema, and especially somebody as passionate as Omar Ali Khan has written something from the heart. There are some books around Mushtaq Azhar's 50 years of Pakistani cinema, but this book, which I would like to show, it says not for resale. Loose Cannons and Dangerous Curves, an unholy Bible of Pakistani popular cinema. This is being launched today. It's a fantastic encyclopedia. I've been reading it non-stop for a week, and it's really educated me in many ways. Umar, I'm going to ask you about the title. What does it mean, Loose Cannons and Dangerous Curves?
I think Loose Cannons is pretty much self-evident. The culture we live in, politically, otherwise, things that are completely from almost Wild West-ish in the sense, and also how much violence is a part of our popular culture and cinema. Dangerous Curves refers to the movie posters that I grew up when I was young, going to cinemas at a ridiculously young age because of my crazy parents, and watching all these, especially Punjabi movie posters where beautiful young women were thrusting out their particular body part, and therefore the loose curve. So that's kind of explaining the
So since you persisted with over 150 reviews in this film, including Pashto and Punjabi, so this is something which has endured over the years, I must say. How did you collect these 150 reviews?
I started writing about movies back in college in America when I chose to become the the reviewer for the college newspaper and did horror movies and forced people to drive to town to watch everything that I wanted to watch. So the bug started then, and then when I came back to Pakistan and the internet was in its infancy, I thought that rather than write about films that everyone was writing about, let's find a niche, or let's write about something that is closer to home and something that I grew up with, and that there had been very little in the English language that had been written about these films, other than in a pretty academic sort of way. So I mean, you can blame me for popularizing a lot of Pakistani films that otherwise would not be heard of, like Asina Atom Bomb. I take the blame for that to some extent. Now it's become a film that's incredibly famous. If you Google that particular film, you'll find pages and pages and volumes written about this movie. There are some Pashto horror movies that people would never have ever known even existed. So I wrote about those. They were remarkable to me, especially being in the culture that we exist in, representing a lot of dichotomies, a lot of culture clashes, and a lot of questions in my mind as to how this even happened. But they're all, to me, they're important because they are part of our journey, and also that if you sort of hide these films away under the carpet and talk about only the polite films like Khuda Ke Liye and good films, perfectly good films, but then you're missing out on what the popular, the films that the public actually paid money and spent their time to go and watch and enjoy sometimes to huge amounts, big successes.
Thank you for that. If I may take you back to your childhood in Rawalpindi, you mentioned your crazy family, but there was a movie buff in your family who named as the biggest influence on you, a Hitchcock buff in your family. Can you tell us a bit about your dad?
The Hitchcock, I mean, he was so influential in our families. I mean, my brother and my elder brother, especially, who's much closer to age than I, along with I. And we used to be taken to, or we were exposed to all sorts of Hitchcock movies, all sorts of films that he actually took the time to drag us to and explain about them and talk us through them. And so he's been the hugest influence of all, especially with my passion for films that put you on the edge of your seat, that kind of thing. He never used to watch Pakistani films. Okay. That was unfortunate relatives who were forced to drive us along to cinemas, whether they liked it or not. So, out of politeness.
So, one childhood memory, Ali, maybe you were in that screening as well. At a very young age, Omar was kicked out of the cinema for some weird behavior. You were like 6 or 7 maybe at the time, and the film was which one?
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
This was in Kent somewhere. My mother's in the audience, but I asked them, what happened exactly? And she said that you just completely went hysterical. You were laughing, crying, screaming, wailing. Something just happened, some really strange thing happened. And I look back at that being an event in my life that's been an influence to me in many ways. The character that I was obsessed with henceforth was the Wicked Witch of the West. Everything about her just was an obsession with me. Her evilness, her color, the monstrous, everything nasty about her was something that inspired me.
Ali, आपको याद है वो screening?
No, I wasn't born.
Oh, okay. In your dreams. अच्छा, तो one of the billboard cutouts you remember from your childhood, Omar, was a film that you spent a long time searching for when you grew up. It was not for children. You weren't allowed to watch it. And you've had a very special relationship with this film, and you've taken it all over the world. हम उसकी पूरी कहानी सुनेंगे और साथ साथ उसके कुछ posters भी देखेंगे. 01 folder please चला दें.
I mean, those days the cinemas all used to be decorated with these massive billboard cutouts, tin cutouts of larger than life figures and so on, and I used to be intrigued by them, all of them. But one of them that caught the attention was a film called Zinda Lash. And I think one of the primary reasons was because I wasn't allowed to watch it. I was too young to watch it, so it became even more like the forbidden fruit that drives you, the curiosity that you've got to see this movie. Unfortunately, we left Pakistan, and this was pre-video days, so we didn't have I didn't get to see it. And then it never appeared on VHS. And when I came back after my studies and came back to Rawalpindi or Islamabad, I tried to find this movie, and I did manage to find a VHS, very scuzzy copy of it, which didn't quite hold together and didn't make sense. So it was a frustrating experience. And then many years later, when we took an exhibition of Pakistani painted posters to England, to London, a friend of mine who asked me to be part of their Indian horror movie commentary. So they asked me if there existed a film from Pakistan that was a Dracula film. So, yeah, exactly. I told him that yes, there was a film that was of this nature, and they said that look, his company is a company called Monde Macabre, and they specialize in finding weird and wonderful cinema from all over the world, which they restore, put together, and then repackage and re-release. So Zinda Lash seemed to fit that bill, and that made me make a few phone calls to try and find if this film was still around. We didn't really know, but a couple of days later the phone rang to say that we found some tins lying in the back of Avenue Studios, some storage room or the other. They haven't got the title written out properly, but we think it might be Zinda Lash. So when I came back to Pakistan, I came with this aim of going to Lahore and trying to find what those tins contained. And ultimately, we were in a tiny little projection booth where the guy ran it through a projector, and there was incredible excitement for me to be actually watching something that I was never able to. And secondly, there was incredible kind of fear and trepidation that the reel, the last existing reel, would snap at any moment, and the film was not actually able to go through a projector once. But most of it did. Some of it was a bit ropey. I know some of it was missing, but it was enough for the film to hold together as a story. So then we sent it back to Europe, where it was worked on and digitally remastered, and they fixed all the nasty stuff on it, steadied some of the scenes that were rocky, and that was produced as a DVD eventually. In those days there were DVDs. And I was fortunate enough to be able to track down the people who were involved in the film, who are no longer with us, so it makes it even more special. Rehan Saab was Dracula. We struck up a very close friendship, which is one of the best things that ever happened to me. Habib Saab, a lot of you will remember, was a very respected actor during this time. He was actually responsible for the film being made. Khaja Sarfraz, the director. I was able to speak to these people and talk to them about what happened during the making of the film, which was completely fascinating.
तो उमर पर जब आपने अपनी फिल्म बनाई ज़िबा खाना, उसमें भी आपने रेहान को कास्ट किया।
मैंने जब वो ज़िबा खाना जब लिखी थी, तो मैंने रेहान साहब का सोचते हुए कि I must include him as like a trope almost, the old man who warns of doom. All of you who've seen 80s slashers movies, 70s slashers movies as I have, will usually know that there's a character that warns the teens about don't do this or something horrible is going to happen. Those of you who saw the original Friday the 13th, you remember the guy who tells them not to go any further. Most of these movies, it's a familiar character, and I enjoyed writing the role specifically in the hope that he'd be able to play that role, because he had left film for almost 30 years by then.
और जब ये सेंसर के पास गई तो उसको क्या सर्टिफिकेट दिया उन्होंने?
ज़िबा खाना को तो उन्होंने बुरी तरह से I mean, they gave me a hassle and I gave them an equal hassle, worse actually. I had watched a lot of these Pashto movies from the 80s and 90s, so I went completely prepared to fight with them tooth and nail about anything that they were going to throw at me. So I think ultimately they got really fed up of this character showing up day after day after day, making their life miserable. And I was actually teaching their own rules to them, saying that, look, according to your rules, you say this is not allowed, that's fine. But you also accept that these things are acceptable. So how do you justify the kind of rape, revenge, violence, and the vigilantism that we see in all these films that I've seen? And I can name you which you've actually passed for general family viewing, extremely borderline nasty films. And so they were getting more and more fed up until finally they had a screening of the film in which they invited the censor board. लोग होते हैं, पता नहीं 14 लोग थे, कितने लोग होते हैं. They were all supposed to come and watch the movie, and my fate was dangling on that. And I remember that day, one black Mercedes rolled into the censor board office, and about half an hour through the movie, he sat down for about 5 minutes and departed the screening room saying that ये film Pakistan में कभी नहीं लग सकती. So again, I just went back and I just kept on bashing my head against the wall until I got results, and they said, "Go away, just get out of here. Take your certification." One of the things they said was, "आपकी film digital में है और हमने आज तक कभी किया नहीं है." So I said, I mean, again, according to the rules, you can have a puppet, like a shadow puppet thing, and even that can be certified as a film. So I was just unwilling to let go, and we got a certificate.
Wow. Those of you who haven't seen Zibakhana, you can catch it somewhere?
At the moment, no, because it's actually, we've been lucky enough to have interest abroad, and so the film has been chopped up into various rights owners.
All right.
Because of that. I have to mention that they did make cuts to the movie. There were about 6 or 7 cuts, none of which I followed. Because I thought, look, you're going to send people. It just doesn't happen. They're not going to check how many times somebody has been stabbed, because there's so many stabbings in our Punjabi and Pashto films anyway. And secondly, all they're looking for is women and so-called vulgarity.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm not going to cut anything, and I did.
Excellent. And Zinda Lash was the first X-rated Pakistani film. Yeah?
It was indeed. Yeah.
Zinda Lash को पहला X सर्टिफिकेट मिला और वो उमर ने पूरी दुनिया में दिखाई. मैं पॉल श्रेडर जो टैक्सी ड्राइवर के राइटर हैं, उनका मैं इंटरव्यू पढ़ रहा था, एंड ही वाज सेइंग दैट लोग कहते हैं 70s का सिनेमा फिल्म मेकर्स बेहतर थे, एंड ही सेड कि नहीं, 70s के फिल्म मेकर बेहतर नहीं थे, 70s की ऑडियंसेस बेहतर थे. या सो फ्रॉम लीडिंग ऑन फ्रॉम दैट वी कम टू अ फिल्म व्हिच यू कांट इवन थिंक ऑफ मेकिंग इट एनीवेयर, आई थिंक राइट नाउ. Something else, another film that you've taken all over the world is Aurat Raj. Okay, Aurat Raj, जो आपने कहाँ गई? Okay, so पहली बात तो ये कि रंगीला की फिल्म है, एंड आफ्टर दी और तूफान की जो हिट हुई थी, he got bankrupt. ये दी और तूफान है, and he became bankrupt when he made this film, Kubra Ashik, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he totally went. It was a very, इसका जो रिव्यू है किताब में, उमर की बुक में ये रिव्यू है, उसके आखिर में लिखा है, इस फिल्म का वाहिद काम है कि शरारती बच्चों को दिखाई जाए सजा के तौर पर. Okay, but Rangila was way ahead of his time. Umar, you agree with that, ना? तो औरत राज के बारे में हम कुछ बात करते हैं कि वो एक कल्ट स्टेटस उसका बन चुका है, और आमतौर पे उसको फेमिनिस्ट फिल्म कहा जाता है, लेकिन आप इससे डिसएग्री करते हैं that this is not a feminist film. Why do you say that?
Firstly, a bit about Aurat Raj. It has gained such a reputation for itself, and I think even when it plays for audiences nowadays, a lot of people of a certain generation can certainly pick up on the fact that it's pulling every leg and more all the time, and it's just it's delicious satire about the way we are, the way we look at the world, the way our movies are made, the attitudes of people who make films, the expectations of audiences. All these things which make us who we are referenced in Aurat Raj. I'm so happy that Saqib Malik is sitting there, because he, I think, must be I take it already for granted that Aurat Raj has been a huge thing in his life as well, because it's just so subversive and so out there and so unashamedly subversive that it takes the, I don't know whether I can say that. It takes the piss out of everything we are, which I think we need to become a more open and sort of grown up, or mature audience, that we can laugh at ourselves without feeling threatened about everything. I think it's fine to joke about things, and Aurat Raj does that with abandon, which I absolutely love. It goes for racism, it goes for stereotypes, it goes for women, and it goes for there's the nuclear bomb, there's the whole IMF thing, there's the whole bartering of the country for a particular purpose. There's so much going on in that movie to pick up on. It may seem like an overtly farcical film, which it is, but between the lines there's so much richness, so much that you can grasp.
Do you recognize this actor? Omar, who is this?
This is Sultan Rahi, and he's wonderful because there's a scene where he says, "मैं Sultan Rahi से सायरा बानू कैसे बन गया?" And it's just amazing, and the way you can tell when you watch this film that people like Wahid Murad, who's just amazing in this film, and this guy Sultan Rahi, I don't think they enjoyed working on a film when it translates to what you're watching, and you can see that they're having the laugh of that. There's a cut in the film which is a little bit late, and they both crack up, falling on the ground. You can see they're laughing out of their minds because the subject matter is so ridiculous and allows them to do all the stereotypical things that our females do on screen. But
so in the end, when the women do get the power, they are shown to be inept. So that's why you say it's not a feminist.
yes, the whole, I mean, it's sort of known as Pakistan's first feminist film, and I keep on thinking, no, I don't know, I'm not quite so sure if it is, because when the women are in a position of ruling the country, which they happen to take charge of everything, they completely fall apart, they're completely incompetent, and they're undone by the most useless things. And they're shown pretty much that you are incompetent in running a country, and you need to remember what your place is correctly in the order of the way things should be. So I kind of question the fact that it is a feminist film. Of course, everyone has their own opinions, they're welcome to vote.
Okay, we have to move along. There's so much to cover. There's such juicy stuff. And Ali, please feel free to come in at any point. Cross-dressing की बात हो रही है. वहीद मुराद, सुल्तान राही को हमने देखा. Another legendary film which Omar has introduced me to is called Jano Ka Patti, and it stars Munawwar Zarif. Munawwar Zarif had a signature role as a cross-dressing village airhead, and he reprised it over and over again. So Jano Ka Patti, that's the story from Jano Ka Patti, yeah? And Umar is going to tell us why this is such an iconic film. Why does it have a special place in actually not Pakistani cinema but actually world cinema? Jano Ka Patti की ऐसी क्या बात है, Umar?
This is 1976, just before there was a military coup, and we had the stunting of so many things which I think we still haven't recovered from. Jano Ka Patti has Munawwar Zarif playing a woman. It's not like he's supposed to be a man. He's actually a naturally born woman. And he has a problem though, because he has these aches and pains, so he has to go to the doctor to get that fixed. And one day the doctor says that you're going to die unless you get operated upon. And so there's a sex change operation, which changes him from being this completely idiotic woman running around town, being the fancy of every man in the village. And then suddenly she is, after the operation, transformed into Janu. He becomes Jani then. And suddenly the film isn't half as interesting after that. But it is interesting because they have to, when he wakes up after the operation, he's all weird and effeminate. And so he has to be re-socialized into being the way that a man is supposed to be. Now, it's just a riot. The film is so ridiculous, so funny. This guy is incredibly funny. And for those of you who wouldn't have heard of films like this, I mean, I take pride in the fact that we've mentioned it so that you can dig it up and enjoy it, even though it's completely deranged and wacky. But we made a sex change film in Pakistan years before anywhere else in Asia, and nobody knows about it. So I'm happy that we did. I think it's history right there.
Absolutely, and Munawwar Zarif has pulled it off amazingly.
Munawwar Zarif sadly didn't last. He actually died while just as this film was going to be released. And his fan base, which was enormous, was so broken-hearted that it wasn't as popular as it should have been. But maybe when I was younger, I didn't appreciate Munawwar Zarif. Maybe my skills of understanding Punjabi weren't that great, they still aren't, but I can tell that he had a unique talent of so many things. I mean, the guy is absolutely makes you cracks me up.
Umar, ये, I mean, this is a little bit of a leap, लेकिन this is very important. Cross dressing की बात हो रही है, तो it's not just men dressing as women, it's also men dressing as bhalus. Like the bear suit in Pakistani film industry has been so influential. ये मुझे अंदाज़ा नहीं था. This is again Umar's genius, and when you come read this book, you'll see कि ये bear suits. Okay, ये animal films हैं, इनके बारे में बात करेंगे. आगे चलते जाएं. Okay, so Chand Hira was a super hit film in which, as you can see, is this an ape or a chimpanzee?
What do you think? I mean, it's difficult to tell. But you can see the zips at the bottom of the soles, which is usually a giveaway, and then the expression that never changes. So that's another giveaway because the size is usually extraordinary. This was an ape movie, which is just wonderful because there are scenes in the beginning of the movie where the ape is at a single sewing machine के साथ baby कपड़े बनाने होते हैं to sort of nudge his uncle into the fact that he should get remarried and have so a very
एक कपड़े सी रहे. हाँ. तो ये चंद हीरा इतनी बड़ी हिट थी कि इसके बाद इन्हीं डायरेक्टर ने एक और फिल्म बनाई जिसका नाम था गंगवा, आई थिंक. हाँ, गंगवा. इसके बाद वाला, इसके बाद ओके स्टॉप. गंगवा जो है, इट्स नॉट जस्ट एन अपीयरेंस बाय अ भालू. गंगवा जो है वो हीरो का बेस्ट फ्रेंड है, और इवन ऑन सुहाग रात द हीरो प्रेफर्स कि इसके साथ टाइम गुजारे, भालू के साथ. बीवी बहुत जेलस हो जाती है कि ये क्या हो रहा है. In the end, then eventually the Gangwa, the Bhalu, saves the Bibi from Gundas, and then she, accepts the Gangwa. So can you please shed some light on Gangwa?
Gangwa, yes, Gangwa. Actually, this is it's inspired by an Indian film called Teri Meherbaniyan, which was about a dog. Particularly stupid movie from the mid-80s or something from that period. But we've adopted it to be Gangwa the bear, and he's part of the family. And yes, he nearly caused the marriage to be dissolved because the woman is so jealous of him. But he's very protective. He shows up at all the times to protect all the virtue of everyone in the village, and he can't do any wrong. Brilliant film. You should watch it.
तो हम इसका एक क्लिप देखेंगे. उमर, वुड यू लाइक टू एक्सप्लेन कि हम क्या देखने लगे हैं? हाँ, ये चंद हीरा है. ओके, चंद हीरा में ये क्या हो रहा है?
ये चंद हीरा में रुखसती हो रही है उनके खानदान में. तो बेचारा हीरा, the ape is getting extremely upset and he can't control his emotion because the girl is about to leave the house. So he's very sad.
So he's crying at the rukhsati of his daughter.
Yeah, very upset.
This is incredible. Like, ये अब हम सोच भी नहीं सकते कि क्या हो चुका है. I'm actually crying with tears. Beautiful, lovely. So to read all about it, Umar's book has full of these treasures. Okay, moving on. एक आपका पूरा सेक्शन है पश्तो फिल्म्स. I have to say कि मैं बिल्कुल नोविस हूँ on पश्तो फिल्म्स. तो अली and Umar, आप please tell me कि ये हसीना एटम बम, as you mentioned, what, and then Bala, these are all पश्तो फिल्म. हसीना एटम बम. Okay.
The thing about Hasina Atom Bomb was that I had got myself a bit of a reputation when I was in college in the States. And in those days of VHS, my elder brother used to go to the local shop and get dozens of movies and keep them for months. And all of them were overdue. But one of the films he got and called me up about in the States, those were pre-internet days, saying that I've got this amazing film which you have to come and see when you get home. So by the time I got home, he had watched it enough times so to have sort of Hisawa parts in the print. And it was just a mind-blowingly warped kind of film. It was it's late 80s, so you've got Pakistan in the grip of the whole powder culture kind of thing, which is reflected in the plot. it's influenced by a film that I think Pakistani films have probably influenced more than any other film, by a film called I Spit on Your Grave, which is seen as the most reprehensible and nasty. It's on the video nasties list, and it's a rape revenge film. And it kind of is a blueprint of a lot of films that have been copied in Pakistan and in India, because it gives you the opportunity of seduction, it gives you the opportunity of several songs, it gives you the opportunity of at least 5 revenge killings. The more brutal, the nastier, the better. And lots of them have been replicated, like Usara Chaheen using a pair of shears on one of her rapists, which is an incredible scene. And I'm not surprised that countries like the UAE banned Pashto films for a while, because they were getting,
I didn't know that.
they're pretty amazing.
Wow.
And I think that Usara Chaheen was pitted against Maulana Fazlur Rahman in a couple of elections.
Absolutely.
What a loss for this country.
And last I heard, she was joining PTI.
Really? Okay. It's a landslide in more than one way. Okay. So, एक पश्तो एक्ट्रेस थी शहनाज जो डायरेक्टर बन गई. आपने उनकी फिल्मों के बारे में बहुत लिखा है. What's so special about Shehnaz's film? This is one, I think. Root Barat. This is a legendary one, Spog में. And इसके बाद, हाँ. So ये मुझे नहीं पता था कि पश्तो फिल्मों में ये हॉरर का एलिमेंट एंड surrealism इतना prevalent है. And this is like, the descriptions and the reviews are really graphic.
These again, they are. If anyone is familiar with I Spit on Your Grave, which I hope you're not, because you're all decent people. So, but if you were by any chance, you know that these films are like offshoots of that particular film. The blueprint is a really horrible, protracted rape scene, followed by the woman fighting back and then perpetrating revenge on the 5 people or the 6 people who were responsible for her demise. And each of the demise comes through seduction. So there's room for song, there's room for a bit of sauciness, there's room for what I call ant cam, which is when the projection or the cameraman is lower at the lowest point of the earth and they upskirt pretty much. That's what the word is these days. So, and then there's the zoom lens, which is sort of manipulated in a way so that it replicates certain things which we don't want to talk about. And it leaves very little to your imagination. They amazed me because I thought these people are really clever, because despite all the rules and the restrictions placed on them, they still know how to get by with their subtleties or unsubtleties. If you look at a film and you think, oh my God, I just saw a nude woman running across the street. But it's not nude, she's covered in kapra, but it's flesh color. And then it's always raining in Pashto movies. So you get shocking, flashing scenes, and you think, good God, did I just see what I saw? And then you reassure yourself that no, you didn't see what you thought you saw, but they wanted you to see what you thought you saw. And, so they know how to play the game, and it's ingenious how they do it. Pashto films especially.
You know, Farjad, if I can just add, I interviewed Shehnaz Begum, and I was so excited because they said, Shehnaz Begum is here. And, me and a colleague went to interview her, and she wasn't a particularly interesting interview because I kept asking her, that movie where you transformed into a cat, and how did you do that? And she said, "Nahi, wo to hum karte rehte hain." But she did, as an aside, she did say how difficult it was for women in the Pashto film industry, and that she had to really struggle to reach. So there's a lot of struggle behind a lot of these stories for them.
This film, I have to say, has got one of my favorite all-time scenes. In fact, 2 of them. There's one bear fight. There are 2 women who have an enormous clash in the jungle, over jungle bears. And then one of them sees something approaching and she runs away, and leaving the other one to contend with what the threat is. Then there's a bear, a kind of psychotic man in a bear suit, who goes completely apeshit. And then ultimately you see that crocodile at the bottom there. That one arrives at the scene after one of the characters goes skinny dipping conveniently, and there's a Neanderthal ape, small one, and he grabs all the clothes so that she's nude when she comes out of the water. So, and then that leads to some more complications, because then she's attacked by the crocodile, which has got rubber lips and lipstick, and I didn't realize that crocodiles have lips, but this one did. It makes Jaws seem like Noddy in Toyland. And ultimately she goes, there's a sex education scene, because the woman then, I don't know if I should. No, I don't know. Terrible, shocking.
Have to see it. Self-censorship. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now to more sedate subjects like Urdu films. ऐसा है कि हम बात करने की बजाय एक क्लिप देखते हैं, क्योंकि ये आपकी किताब में बहुत जो इसकी लोकेशन है, that's really important. It's called the Kilab. We'll talk about the Kilab after watching.
Actually ask everyone to own up who actually went to parties like this. I'm sure all of you did, and your lies if you did very much. Or maybe you're too young, but this is what people like me would aspire to be in a club or a birthday party, because the clubs kind of went out of scene. And then disco killed the club. But
तो इसमें जो डांस हो रहा है उसको आपने अपनी किताब में हेयर डांस लिखा है. What is hair dance?
उस ज़माने में you saw they just use their hair brilliantly, just in the most incredible ways, the men and the women. And for those of you who, like Saqib, who've seen enough of these people, you'll recognize everyone there, because they showed up in every single such dance, the same characters again and again and again for decades. The club, all of these people are going to burn in hell, you know that. Because unka motto hai, life ko enjoy karna chahiye, life is not to be bored. That's a line from a movie. That's a line which I kind of agree with, but not a good person.
हाँ, एक सेकंड मैं एक्सप्लेनेशन दे दूँ. ये क्लिप क्योंकि बहुत दहला देने वाला ये क्लिप है कि there's a very common trope about Western values and Eastern values, और Western values वाले hang out with dirty hippies in the club, और जो Eastern values वाले वो घर में घर बात करते हैं. तो ये फिल्म तहजीब जो है, it's a classic, उसमें शाहिद actually comes out of his Western ways. उसको ये ख्याल आता है कि मैं अब अपनी ज़िंदगी तब्दील करूँ, और वो ईस्टर्न वैल्यूज़ की तरफ बढ़ता है. तो उसको किस तरह दिखाया है हमारे सिनेमा, कितना मेटाफोरिक होता था, ये हम देखते हैं. ये गुड़िया है, इसको हम रिपीट करेंगे, चलेंगे. यस, शाहिद देख रहा है. Too good to be true. This is 1976, I think. 70, sorry. Okay, thank you for correction. तो तहजीब फिल्म और ये बार्बी डॉल को ड्रेसअप करना, ये एक वेस्टर्न ईस्टर्न का क्लैश चल रहा था उमर, विच यू टॉक अबाउट वेरी ऑफन. थोड़ा सा इसके बारे में बताएंगे, बिकॉज बिगड़ी नस्लें, मोहब्बत ज़िंदगी है, ऑल दीज पूरा कागज़.
These were my favorite genre of Pakistani films, the culture clash ones, because I saw so much hypocrisy in them, shall I put it that way. Look, they wanted to make money, it's what you think people want to watch. I get it, it's fine, I don't have a problem with that. But it became something that was ridiculous to the point of being comical when we are kidding ourselves to an extent. Like there's a Shami Mara's film called Playboy, in which Kadish plays a man who emigrates to Britain, gets a job there, marries an English lady, and they have a daughter who is contaminated with the English woman's blood. So, I mean, it's literally spoken about as contamination, that her life has been ruined because her blood is sullied because she's of a different culture. And to cut a long story short, in the end, to survive that evil and that nasty culture, a culture that can only lead you to doom. In fact, the daughter is gang molested or whatever, and she dies. But all of the rest of them decide to come back to Pakistan, one-way ticket, and life is hunky-dory after that. So that's fine, that's a lovely thought, but I mean, you know, why are therefore people going on ships to get out of the country? It's another question that needs to be asked. These films raise a lot of questions. There's so much to be, you know, to be got from the mindset that existed, or the mindset of the public who watched them and made these films sometimes very successful.
ये एक बहुत रिकरिंग ट्रोप है सोसाइटी गर्ल का और सोसाइटी क्लब्स का एंड बिगेस्ट हिट्स सम ऑफ द बिगेस्ट हिट्स आर दीस फिल्म बिगड़ी नस्लें एक्चुअली आई थिंक इज बेस्ड ऑन मंटोज ममी इज इट a short story where there's an older woman being a predator on younger boys. So Umar appreciates that कि ये कुछ तो subversion है, although the film falls apart in the end, but still credit to them for doing this. अच्छा, टाइम थोड़ा है. अगर आप लोग इजाज़त दें तो मैं Q&A में भी कुछ दिखाना चाहता हूँ. उमर अवेलेबल होंगे for questions, or maybe we can take 2 questions. Okay, so because really important film एक आगे आ रही है अगले, because you bracket it under feminist film, उमर, और हमने बात की औरत राज की वगैरह, but obviously the biggest iconic film which is very relevant to the times right now is Zarka. All right. तो इस पे भी नज़र नहीं आ रहा, लेकिन जो पोइट्री लिखी है ए फ़लस्तीन, ये हबीब जालिब की पोइट्री है, एंड ऑब्वियसली डायरेक्टेड बाय रियाज शाहिद, एंड इट्स एन आइकॉनिक फिल्म ऑन पैलेस्टाइन. इसमें नीलो प्लेज द रोल ऑफ ज़रका. शी इज़ अ सुसाइड बॉम्बर. आप थोड़ा सा बताएं.
Ultimately, yes, she does. She is a suicide bomber. She's a naive young girl whose father is tortured and killed. And ultimately she joins the freedom fighters movement, and that's how the film develops. But I remember I was young enough to see the crowds outside the cinemas where this was playing when it was first released. It was a huge, huge success. I think Riyaz Shahid had, you may not agree with his politics all the time, but he had the ability to tell a story and tell it quite well, which I don't think his son has got the same ability, even though he has some very weird, politically twisted kind of movies, which he's produced over the years. But Riyaz Shahid had the ability to hold a film together and hold your interest. And some of the films like Zarka, I remember leaving the theatre, and you sensed that there wasn't a dry eye in the entire house. So people were deeply moved by his work. There was Alauddin, who was emotionally, that this film carried a punch that was very rare for a Pakistani film.
ये 1969 है और अब हम 2024 में हैं. आपके ख्याल में अब ऐसी फिल्म बन सकती है?
I don't know which direction people want their films to go in. I find we make a lot of films that are slanted propaganda-wise, and I don't think we deserve that. I think we deserve better. I also think that sometimes across the border they make some pretty nasty films about our side of the border, but I don't think that replying with the same kind of hatred serves any purpose. And there seems to be this back and forth. They only badar banaye to humne ye banaye, humne wo banaye to humne ye. But ultimately all it's doing is reinforcing more hatred. So I wish there would be more films that would show differences in a positive light than showing everyone to be like a monolithic thinking goodness. Because there's goodness and evil of equal amounts in all sorts of societies and religions.
Absolutely. और ज़रका के बाद यही भी रियाज शाहिद ने अल आसिफा बनाई. It's set in Golan Heights, फ़लस्तीन के बॉर्डर पे, और ये भी बहुत पावरफुल फिल्म है. I think अब next quarter पे चलते हैं. We have lots. I want to share so much. लेकिन ये जो next चीज़ है, this is recent. This film got into trouble with the censors before they even saw the film. इससे अगला पोस्टर और इससे भी अगला, because इसका ओरिजिनल टाइटल ये था, जनरल रानी. So हम में से अक्सर लोगों को जनरल रानी का पता है 70s का आइकॉनिक फिगर याहिया और भुट्टो के इरा की वो पर्सनालिटी थी एंड शी हैड अ लॉट ऑफ पावर बिकॉज शी नो लॉट ऑफ सीक्रेट्स. तो जनरल रानी फिल्म 1995 की है जबकि एक डेमोक्रेटिक गवर्नमेंट थी पावर में एंड स्टिल इट गॉट इनटू ट्रबल. जब फिल्म देखे बगैर उन्होंने क्या किया उमर? व्हाट डिड दिस डू?
Initially, I think they objected to the word general, obviously, so they didn't want to, even though it was retrospective, but they didn't want, they thought that it would insult an institution by using the word general. So the word general was expunged from all the posters. They had to go back and print them again as Madam Rani. And throughout the movie, they removed the word general when she was, so they had to redub the film to get it past the censors to avoid that. And I found myself when I was writing about this movie, thinking, should I change this word? Should I change this word? Should I change this word? Just to not get in the wrong side of what people think are, should we say, unpatriotic or anti-national? I mean, none of those things. But you don't want to be looked at or perceived as somebody who's doing that, especially if you live here.
Yeah. So जनरल रानी में जनरल का रस मैडम हो गया और एक्चुअली फिल्म में द रियल जनरल रानी बहुत कम है. ऐसी बात नहीं है कि उनके ऊपर फिल्म है. It's actually a very patriotic film. I remember seeing it in the cinema and Nadeem is coming down in a parachute and he's looking really embarrassed because he's actually hanging from a wall and the camera is going like this. Poor Nadeem. Okay, so I think we have to stop. Unfortunately, ताकि कुछ हम questions ले लें. Can I request कि we take 2 or 3 questions together? इकट्ठे questions आएं ताकि time बच जाए हमारा. किसके पास है माइक? Okay, future of film in Pakistan. वो पीछे बैठे हैं उनको दें.
Is there a room for films based on novels or other literary works in today's world?
Okay. Future film and
future film is something like you, I think about frequently. There's a lot of disappointment because people who dare to push lines or to move things around or perhaps to switch it up a little bit, they I don't think find much encouragement. In fact, there's the opposite. You're discouraged. You get into trouble. Your film isn't released. You won't make any money. So if you rock the boat a little bit too much, I find that you may end up having to water down your product so that it's at least accessible to people. There's a film about a man who lived amongst us here, Javed Iqbal. I never got to watch the movie. I wish I was able to, but Javed Iqbal was a Pakistani man who lived amongst us, and his horrendous crimes, just by banning a film, doesn't make the crimes go away. So I think there's, again, a lot of mature. I think our censor board treats us very shabbily. I think we get treated like children who can't make their minds up about certain issues, people who can't confront or discuss certain things, which may not be very pleasant, but they exist all around us in every society. And I think that we should be able to have discussions about these things without the discussion being deadened altogether. And I hate films that are propaganda films, which are glorifying war machines and bloodshed and hatred. Those offend me greatly. And I see in the last 10, 15 years there have been too many of those. And then there's sort of another kind of film which is like the dumbed down rom-com, which has become so repetitive, and there's so many of them, and it doesn't ever allow you to stop and think critically about anything. So I think that cinema that forces you to think about ourselves is somewhat inhibited in our society. And I think that shouldn't be the case. You could change the censors, you could have films that are for an adult audience, people like us. Not everything has to be watched by the family. But films which provoke thought, I think, are in trouble over here more than they're not, unfortunately.
The book comes up to Zindagi Tamasha and Joyland.
Yeah,
so it's like up to speed, as they say.
I think, Farjad, there's also an issue that even though film may survive, but cinemas are in bigger trouble. I think now we have streaming and other avenues.
Yeah, and the question about novels and people's work being used, literature being used, I think there is a capability of that. So long as we're allowed to be true to what those novels are saying. We shouldn't have to water down things. So I think that part of the importance of cinema is that it throws up issues that we can discuss and talk about. We don't have to agree upon everything. We don't, in fact, cinema is richer for the fact that we disagree about it. I believe that.
The Pakistani Umrao was watered down like anything, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So what do you think of that? Was Pakistani Umrao a good film?
I would not say it's
Read
not
book.
particularly good film.
इसमें है एक्चुअली डिबेट तो बहुत लंबी है अक्सर पोस्टर्स पे हम देखते हैं 70s के बेस्ड ऑन अ नॉवल ऑफ रजिया भट्ट लिखा होता है मंटो की मम्मी पे बना यक्के वाली वाज आल्सो मंटो स्टोरी सो ये उस वक्त लिटरेचर और फिल्म का बहुत गहरा ताल्लुक है आई थिंक अब टेलीविजन में कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट्स हो रहे हैं बिकॉज दे कैन अफोर्ड टू filmmaker can't afford to experiment, as Ali has rightly pointed out. Cinemas ही नहीं हैं to make your money back. One more question, if
I have a question.
Please.
State intervention in the cinema that is present nowadays, state intervention in the 21st century. I just want to know that you obviously have the occasional TV show and movies being made by state agencies. I won't name any particular one because I want to live. But was state intervention as present in the cinema of that era as it is now? That I'd like to know.
There has been, that's a good question. There have been differences in the periods as we've gone along our history. There's been in the 50s there was a certain kind of film that was encouraged because we were a new country, so they encouraged anti-British films, anti-colonial films with Sudhir, people like that being representative of fighting for the freedom of the country. That was a big thing in the 50s. The 60s came along, I think, again, we're talking about commercial cinema here. And there was this thing about the men are at work and the women are not, and they have money. So there was a switch to a much more melodramatic film, like your social movie, which is about, bahus and sasses and so on and so forth. That was aimed at the pocket of the female viewer, and that filled cinemas up in the matinee show and during the daytime. So there was, the state, bossing films in a certain way has always been part of our experience.
Ali Khan, Mola Jet was banned, or they tried to ban it.
Well, after 77 and Ziaul Haq, all the films certificates were taken away. None of the films were allowed to be displayed until they were recertified. And a lot of the films had to be chopped up and changed. And some of the films that you see that have been made and released in 78 and 79, you can sense that they've been adjusted so that they fit a certain shoe, so that they could be shown publicly. There's a film which I even saw called Nahi Tehzeeb, which had a credit which I was quite amazed at because I'd never seen it before, but it said, what was it? Islamic suggestions, something to that effect. So it was, I'd never seen that before. So but by 1979, it was something that was more and more something that they wanted to inject and take a film in a certain direction. So we've had that. Better, more and less, it's ebbed and flowed over the years.
Yeah.
The last few years have been quite frustrating because we've had bans on films that absolutely don't deserve to be shown.
That's the question है जी about the censor board कि वो does it comprise of psychopaths or is there an agency behind that that is like that?
I wish it was comprised of psychopaths. But I think with the censor, I dealt with a chairman who was a very sweet man, but I kept on going, having met him, I'd always go back and see, does he actually watch movies? Does he have any connection with cinema? Does he know about the history of cinema or anything like that? And the question would often be answered with a no. So I think it's still a case of political appointees of people who a certain party may have won an election and they rope in people to have a cushy job.
My second part was, is there an agency behind the censor board?
अब ये तो कहना मुश्किल है,
ये तो नहीं कह सकते।
ये नहीं कह सकते, कह भी सकते नहीं कह सकते। एक मैं चीज़ आपकी इनके क्वेश्चन से कनेक्ट कर रहा हूँ आपके क्वेश्चन को कि in the old days we used to have a entity called NAFDEC, जो प्रोपेगेंडा फिल्म बनाने की कोशिश करती थी, 3 साल में एक फिल्म बनाई नसीम हिजाजी के नॉवल पे, एंड नाउ द स्टेट इज़ द बिगेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर ऑफ फीचर फिल्म्स इन पाकिस्तान. इट इज़ द बिगेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर विद द बिगेस्ट बजट्स एंड द बिगेस्ट एजेंडाज. तो ये चेंज कहीं पे नहीं आया दुनिया में इतना बड़ा कि फिल्म इंडस्ट्री तबाह हो गई, लेकिन प्रोड्यूसर इज़ द स्टेट डूइंग प्रोपेगेंडा फिल्म्स. मौला जट की बात की थी अली आपने. टू रैप थिंग्स अप, आई जस्ट वांट टू नरेट दिस स्टोरी ताकि आप लोग मौला जट की सीक्वल के बारे में जान सकें. मौला जट पे बहुत बात हो चुकी. दिस इज़ द फर्स्ट ऑफिशियल सीक्वल टू मौला जट इन लंदन, क्योंकि मौला जट जो है उस पर मुकदमा चलाया जाता है और फैसला होता है कि इसको हम दफना तो नहीं सकते, इसको एग्जाइल में किसी मुल्क बाहर के भेज दें. लेकिन प्रॉब्लम ये होती है, नोबडी इज विलिंग टू एक्सेप्ट सच ए डेंजरस कैरेक्टर. तो इवन नॉर्थ कोरिया रिफ्यूजेस कि हमें नहीं चाहिए ये बंदा. फिर एक मीटिंग होती है जिसमें कहते हैं इसको लंदन भेजा जाए, क्योंकि लंदन में हर मैजेस्टी की पुलिस जो है वो इसको ठीक करेगी. जब मौला जट उतरता है प्लेन से तो हर मैजेस्टी की पुलिस उसको ग्रीट करती है.
एक तो पंजाबी बड़ी अच्छी बोलती है,
पंजाबी में ग्रीट करते हैं.
They really speak great Punjabi, because the moment Maula Jat comes in, they're strangely tanned people, and the airport looks a little shabby. But anyway, he's taken to the judge, who also reverts to Punjabi in one sentence. It's surreal. But the film then unwinds on the streets in the rather drab streets of sort of Southall and
Southall में शूट हुई.
Uh,
And as precaution वो उसका गंडासा ले लेती है ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट, और उसको कहाँ रखती है उमर गंडासे को?
Madam Tussauds.
Next to मोहम्मद अली कैशिस प्लेस स्टैचू. हाँ, वो गंडासा उधर पड़ा हुआ है ताकि ये किसी को मारे ना. So I think on that note, this is the flavor of this book.
This is the only copy that's available worldwide. This is the one full of mistakes, but it is available on Amazon. And I've been promised by Liberty Books that they will make it available as soon as they get the shipping. Probably in a week, maybe 10 days.
Maybe 10 days.
So,
do get it and don't get it censored. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you.
जरूर, मुझे घर याद आता है.
लास्ट चैप्टर तो मैंने और एक्सपेंड किया.
अच्छा, मैं पढ़ूंगा.
और ये ऑनलाइन भी है.
ओके ओके. थैंक यू सर, बहुत शुक्रिया. थैंक यू फॉर कमिंग. मज़ा आया. अभी तो आधा हुआ है, आधा पड़ा हुआ है, कितना कुछ है. नाले पे करूँगा पॉपुलर सिनेमा का. हाँ, शाम को मैंने पहचान लिया था तुम्हें. हाँ, आई जस्ट से सलाम. हाँ, थैंक यू कुत्सिया. मैं तुम्हें फ़ोन करूँगा. हाँ, वही ना, काम की भी बात करनी है तुमसे.
Since you have classes on अपना डाल देना. अपना डाल. Just put your local one and I'll just WhatsApp. And you said कि आप पता लगा. I can stay around here. I'll come and grab coffee. I just have to meet some people. Because David Siddhartha को मैं I'm now working on set.
It's a fun picture. Rakib and Iftikhar and
I have to get
Umar.